Welcome to today's webinar. It is my great pleasure to host Dr. Stella Britwum Acquah from the CSIR-Forestry Research Institute of Ghana. She will talk about the, no, it's fine. I'm going to do my IUFRO thing and then we'll figure out the audio if that works, Stella. Stella will talk about the assessment of deforestation and forest degradation in community resource management areas in the northern Savanna zone. And she will give a presentation, which will be followed by a question and answer period. And I hope to wrap everything up by 10 a.m. Vancouver time. Before I hand over the floor to Stella and we'll figure out the audio, I would first like to acknowledge that I'm hosting this webinar from my home in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia, which is located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coquitlam First Nation. I thank the Coquitlam who continue to live on these lands and care for them along with the water and all that is above and below. Second, I would like to remind you that the webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the IUFRO webpage. And third, I would like to acknowledge that this webinar concludes the 2023 Forest Mensuration and Modelling Chats, which are organized by the IUFRO Research Group 401 Forest Mensuration and Modeling. The planned November presentation looks like fell through, but I'm currently planning webinars for 2024 and hope to move that speaker to 2024. If you do have speaker suggestions, please email me at bianca.eskelson@uvc.ca. And as this is an IUFRO event, I would like to highlight IUFRO's mission to advance research excellence and knowledge sharing and to foster development of science-based solutions to forest-related challenges for the benefit of forest and people worldwide. The webinar series is being organized in the spirit of knowledge sharing and to allow for some interaction and networking. And now that I've covered the IUFRO requirements, please help me welcome Dr. Stella Britwum Acquah, and let's figure out the screen sharing and the audio. You should be able, yeah.
Bianca. So should I share my screen now?
Yes, that would be perfect. Perfect.
Please, is it okay now?
Yes, it looks perfect.
Okay, thank you. So good morning to you all, and it's good evening here. My name is Stella Britwum Acquah, and I would like to present to you some of the work that I've been doing with a team of scientists back home after my PhD program. Currently, we are working on assessment of deforestation and forest degradation in creamers in the northern Savanna zone of Ghana. So I'll first give a brief background, the objective of the study, and since the creamer concept is not very familiar, I'll talk a little bit about that before I delve into the methods, findings, and some potential interventions that we have put in place that can be used to address the drivers of deforestation and forest degradation, and then conclusion. Ghana is experiencing alarming deforestation and forest degradation with an annual rate of 2%, which is equivalent to 135,000 hectares of forest, loss of forest cover. And the Savanna zone is one of Ghana's core zones, which is undergoing rapid deforestation and forest degradation, including the loss of valuable share trees. This loss in forest cover has not only destroyed the environment, but has caused massive losses in economic products, such as share kennels and charcoal, that are critical safety nets for the poor in the zone. And the Ghana Share Landscape Emissions Reduction Project, which is being implemented by the Forestry Commission of Ghana, in collaboration with UNDP and the Global Share Alliance, amongst other things, was developed to restore 2,000 hectares of off-reserve savanna forests and place them under self-financing creamers. And This intervention is to help reduce emissions. This intervention is to help reduce emissions from deforestation and forest degradation and build the resilience of local communities through a transformational change process to withstand the adverse effects of climate change. Thus, this has necessitated the need to identify the drivers of deforestation and forest degradation and tackle the underlying factors that cause deforestation in the savanna landscape. Therefore, the objective of this study was to identify the drivers of forest or tree cover loss and other risk factors influencing the ecosystem, socioeconomic factors, and climate resilience of community resource management area landscapes within the JSLIP area, and develop potential, practical, and sustainable response trial interventions to address the drivers of forest or tree cover loss and risks. So I'll briefly talk about what CREMA is. And CREMA is a geographically defined area that includes one or more communities that have agreed to manage natural resources in a sustainable manner for their own benefits. And CREMA was launched by the Wildlife Division of the Forestry Commission of Ghana in the early 2000s to curb the destruction of wildlife habitats in off-reserve areas. And the purpose of the CREMA was that they were tasked to engage in actions and activities to reduce deforestation and forest degradation, promote sustainable farming practices, ensure the curtailment of illegal logging, and enhance the conservation and management of protected areas and forest reserves. And the governance structure of the CREMA is like this. The CREMA is governed by Community Resource Management Committee, which serves as a basic unit of the CREMA governance and CREMA Executive Committee. The Community Resource Management Committee are formed at each community level, and not more than 13 community members are selected in the community to constitute the Community Resource Management Committee. And representatives from each Community Resource Management Committee are also nominated to form the CREMA Executive Committee, which represents the highest decision-making organ of the CREMA. The membership of the CREMA Executive Committee is not to exceed 15 core members from the various community resource management committees and other stakeholders that the CREMA Executive Committee may deem appropriate may be invited as ex officio members or co-opted members to support CREMA governance and management. Currently in Ghana, we have about 42 documented CREMAs. So I'll just delve into the methods. So the study was conducted in the northwestern part of Ghana. It involved 8 CREMA communities, which form part of 6 CREMAs. And the communities the names are they are difficult to pronounce. Even I am not from that region, so the names are very difficult for me. Zupri, Chakali, Sangmalu, Sisala, Kasanafra, Sanyiga, Kasena Garvakara, Murugu Mognori, and Yazori Kumbo. So these are the 6 CREMAs that we contacted. And the methods used for this study were desk study literature review, spatial analysis of land cover change, focus group discussions, and ecological assessments. For the desk study and literature review, we reviewed reports and published and unpublished literature relating to risks and drivers of deforestation and forest degradation, past or existing restoration interventions, climate-smart agricultural interventions, and technologies in the savanna landscape. And for spatial analysis of land cover change, we looked at land use land cover maps for 1992, 2001, 2008, 2012, 2016, and 2020. They were developed using ESA or CCI Land Cover Project database. And the maps were reclassified into 8 principal land use land cover classes. That is agriculture, forest, grasslands, wetlands, settlements, shrubland, bare areas, and then water. For the focus group discussions, 9 separate focus group discussions were conducted in 8 Creamer communities, and 8 to 15 participants were engaged in the focus group discussion in each community, where participants were drawn from the various communities that formed the Creamer. Participants were asked to share their experiences regarding tree cover changes over 2 decades, and they were then tasked to mention the direct and indirect drivers of forest or tree cover loss in the communities. The identified direct drivers were scored by each participant using 20 matchsticks, where the most important driver was given the highest matchstick score, followed by the next to the least important based on their perspective. The results were presented to the participants for validation, and the participants were then tasked to indicate specific strategies for addressing each identified driver. So these are some of the pictures of the focus group discussions we had with the communities. And for the ecological assessment, rapid ecological assessment was conducted in 8 selected Creamer communities, and this comprised of a 2-pronged approach of field observation. Field observations were undertaken in each community, taking note of ecologically important attributes such as plant species composition and diversity, plant-livestock interactions. We looked at active signs of grazing, and then signs of recent fires, then farming systems. We looked at agroforestry, harvesting of wood for timber, and then land use practices. And to gain the local ecological knowledge of the community people, questions of ecological relevance were integrated into the focus group discussion. Examples include their knowledge about tree species in their communities, interest in tree planting, and preferred species in case there's going to be any intervention in their communities. So the findings. These are some of the findings. With regards to trends in forest cover change, between 1992 and 2020, land cover changes occurred in all the land use types. And forests showed a steady increase from 2001 to 2016, but a sharp increase in 2020. And forests observed the highest increment, about 0.8 million hectares in 2020. Agriculture recorded a moderate increment from 1992 to 2016, but decreased by 1%. And wetland, grassland, and shrubland recorded higher decreases in all the years. And the spatial increase in forests can be observed in the Savanna and then the northern zones of the country between 1992 and 2020 as compared to Upper West, Upper East, and the Northeast regions. When it comes to the drivers of deforestation and forest degradation, 9 direct drivers of deforestation and forest degradation were identified, and these are infrastructure development, agricultural expansion, bushfire, overgrazing, sand winning, wood harvesting for charcoal and fuel wood, excessive harvesting of medicinal plants, illegal mining, and illegal logging. These identified drivers vary in prevalence among Creamers and within Creamer communities, and are attributed to some underlying factors such as population growth, weak law enforcement, poverty, and then limited non-farm livelihood opportunities. So according to the participants, bushfire was the most important driver for 5 of the Creamer communities, and then second for one Creamer. And then when it comes to overgrazing, it was important for the second for one Creamer and third for 2 of the Creamers. When it comes to wood harvesting for charcoal and firewood, it was the first important or the most important for 2 of the Creamers, second for 1, and then third for 3 of them. And illegal logging was second for 2 of the creamers, and third for 1 creamer. So overall, the leading drivers of deforestation and forest degradation was bushfire, wood harvesting for charcoal and fuel wood, overgrazing, and then illegal logging. The other 4 only contributed 13%. So what are the causes of the leading drivers of these deforestation and forest degradation? According to the participants, some hunters use fires to trap animals, which often causes forest fires, especially during the dry season. Also, some farmers cook in their farms during the dry season and unfortunately do not quench the fire after cooking. They also talked about charcoal burning, slash and burn farm practices. And then cattle herders, they also deliberately burn the grasses to stimulate the growth of fresh grass for cattle. So these activities have accelerated deforestation and forest degradation in the savanna landscape because the fires spread over large tracts of forest lands, causing massive destruction of forest and vegetation. In terms of wood harvesting for charcoal and fuel wood, charcoal and firewood are the major household energy sources in the northern savanna zone. And charcoal production is a key commercial activity because the poverty level in Ghana leaves them no option but to depend on forest resources for their livelihood. And there's limited agricultural activity during the dry season because the rainy season lasts for only about 4 months in the savanna zone. And dry season farming is impossible because of the lack of irrigation facilities. When it comes to overgrazing, there are no dedicated areas for cattle and donkey grazing. And large herds of cattle often migrate to the community because some traditional authorities admit the Fulani herders into the community. And these migrant cattle, they eat everything, including neem trees, which even our local cattle do not eat. Neem trees, as a director indica, is very bitter. And even our local cattle, they don't like it. But these migrant cattle, they eat everything. And also, illegal logging. The participants indicated that due to the high market demand for timber for domestic use and export, much pressure has been put on the forest, leading to deforestation and forest degradation. So during the focus group discussion, the participants indicated strategies that could be used to curb deforestation and forest degradation. For bushfires, they talked about law enforcement, that people should be punished. People who burn the forest should be punished. And there should be sensitization and education on bushfires. And then fire bells should be created around their farms. Controlled burning should be encouraged. And there should be good relationship between creamers and non-creamer community members. And fire volunteers should be recruited, trained, and equipped in the communities. In terms of wood harvesting for charcoal and firewood, they recommended woodlot establishment, use of improved stoves, promotion of efficient charcoal kilns, and enforcement of bylaws, and avoid cutting fresh trees and focus on harvesting dead trees. And trees for firewood should be pruned, but not economic trees such as shea. And when it comes to overgrazing, creation of pastures for cattle grazing, and there should be dedicated area for cattle, and government support to manage conflict between communities and Fulanis, and regulation on the movement of cattle. And for illegal logging, they were of the view that there should be bylaws to prevent chainsaw operators, and there should be awareness of the importance of trees, increased awareness, and collaborative management between the Forestry Commission and the local community. And community members should be able to arrest forestry officials stealing trees, tree planting exercise, should be undertaken regularly, and bylaws to plant 2 trees for any 1 tree that is cut. So those were the perspectives of the community members. So for our study, what we proposed, the proposed interventions to address the deforestation and forest degradation. This is what, after our findings, this is what we are proposing. Sorry. So for bushfires, we think we should determine, to address this driver of deforestation, a combination of interventions are proposed. First is to determine community fire risk status and establish a benchmark for evaluation, and then conduct risk assessment of all biological resources, agriculture, and environment prone to fire hazards. Establish a predictable fire hazard scheme of warning, and train relevant stakeholders in integrated fire management practices, and create fire volunteer groups. Establish fire towers and use GIS and remote sensing tools for monitoring and managing wildfires. And when it comes to the field trials, we're also proposing that there should be creation of fire breaks, which will involve 2 methods. That is establishment of green fire breaks. And green fire breaks involve planting strips of fire-resistant species with high fire tolerance. Example of species, we could use leguminous plants, multipurpose tree species. And then also, we could also establish cleared fire breaks, which are created by stripping all vegetation down to the mineral soil using mechanical or other means. And the width of such breaks will be 5 meters or more, depending on the severity of fire, especially in the planted fields. So the decision is to set up trials of green fire breaks and cleared fire breaks in areas or in communities where bushfire was the key driver for deforestation and forest degradation. And when it comes to wood harvesting for charcoal and firewood, these are some of the proposed interventions. There should be community education on sustainable harvesting practices, enactment of bylaws to regulate charcoal business, and use of improved cook stoves and kilns, irrigated tree nurseries to ensure seedling availability for planting, and then building sustainable wood supply base through woodlot establishment, including trees on farms. And various planting approaches could also be used to rehabilitate the deforested areas or degraded forests. And we could use pure woodlot establishment or woodlot establishment using agroforestry practices such as agri-silviculture, silvo pasture, alley cropping, and enrichment planting, or farmer-managed natural regeneration. And for pure woodlots, different designs will be used depending on several factors. That is land availability, species preferences, intended use of the woodlot. So where we have sufficient land, woodlots targeting the supply of wood for fuel and charcoal production could be designed in rotational plots, allowing for annual harvesting cycles according to the year of planting. For the species that grow fast and have good coppicing abilities are planted, which allows for regrowth after the annual harvesting cycles. And where land is scarce, woodlots could be designed to allow wide alleys in between for the integration of food crops. So these are some of the experimental trials. This is just a woodlot trial. Will be established using a randomized complete block design. And this design is used in view of the expected soil heterogeneity in each community. And the trees will be planted using a planting distance of about 2 meters, and 4 treatments based on selected species will be planted, and each treatment will be replicated 3 times. So when it comes to woodlots in agroforestry systems, the trees will be planted together with one of the commonly planted food crops in the landscape, such as maize, sorghum, or millet. And the trees will be planted using a planting distance of 3 meters by 3 meters. Alley cropping could also be used, which involves planting trees for fuelwood, stakes, poles, fodder, and other products, as well as seasonal food crops. For these planting patterns, the trees are planted in blocks, and food crops are planted in between the blocks or alleys. And another is if there's land constraint or unavailability of land, trees can be planted on the boundaries of the farm. And in both patterns, leaves of the trees in the blocks or on the boundary are pruned at the end of every cropping season, spread to the food crop areas or alleys, and incorporated into the soil to enrich it for cropping in the following season. When another intervention, that is enrichment planting, could also be conducted on fallow lands or degraded areas using both native species and compatible exotic species that grow well in the localities. And enrichment planting trials will target the introduction of multi-purpose tree species such as medicinal plants, fodder trees, timber trees, and fuelwood trees. To address this driver that is overgrazing, it would be important to increase our knowledge of how cattle herders gain and maintain access to the land and the livelihood implications of the activities of the cattle herders in the northern Savanna zone, and also to establish stakeholder forums where different actors, including herders and farmers, would have the opportunity to dialogue and designate community grazing lands, plant fodder trees, grass and herb to have sustainable sources of feed for livestock and fodder banks. So plants vary greatly in suitability as forage for animals, hence not all grasses, herbs, and trees are suitable or preferred for livestock. So animals may feed on certain plants out of need, but not necessarily because they possess the best nutrient quality for nourishment and growth. So as a result, one way will be to improve forage quality and quantity of natural ecosystems to deliberately introduce or reintroduce desirable species belonging to key plant functional groups, such as those of high forage quality and high biomass production, to provide adequate feed for livestock. And two approaches could use the woody layer restoration and the herbaceous layer restoration. So for the herbaceous layer, 3 herbaceous plants that provide good forage quality and quantity will be used as treatments in the study. And seeds of these desirable forage species will be obtained and spread in the established sample plots just before the onset of the rains to restore such areas with plants of high forage quality and quantity. And all sample plots will be fenced to allow for better comparison of the plots, excluding other external factors such as grazing, weedicide application, animal trampling, and farming. And when it comes to the woody layer restoration, the experimental design involves trials with different fodder tree species. This may be done through pure tree planting plots, agroforestry systems, or even enrichment planting. And suitable fodder tree species to be planted include Albizia lebec, Lyricidia, and African rosewood. And studies from these trials will provide useful information about the suitability of applying the seedling method and its species suitability for improving forage production in the landscape. So in conclusion, we'll say that 9 drivers of deforestation and degradation were identified. And 4 out of the 9, that is bushfires, wood harvesting, overgrazing, and illegal logging, emerged as the leading drivers of deforestation and forest degradation, collectively accounting for 80% of forest or tree cover loss. And a combination of interventions is proposed to address the causes of deforestation and forest degradation, which are yet to be rolled out in the field. So we urge stakeholders to collaborate in implementing these practical and sustainable interventions so that together we can foster positive change in the landscape, mitigating risks, and enhancing the resilience of ecosystems. Thank you.
Thank you, Stella. That was terrific. I have some questions, but before we move to the questions and answer period, I will share my screen one more time. There we go. To draw your attention to the IUFRO Congress, the 2024 IUFRO Congress in Stockholm in Sweden, that will take place on June 23rd to 29th next June. And I think the registrations are already open for the Congress. And as I mentioned earlier, there are plans for the 2024 Forest Mensuration and Modelling Chats series. If you do have suggestions for speakers, please email me. Once we have some speakers lined up, there will be announcements sent out through the Division 4 mailing list. So please subscribe to that if you haven't yet. And the webinars will also be posted in the IUFRO calendar, and I will post those links in the chat in a little bit. And so far then, thank you for your attention. Please stay. I will stop the recording. Please stay for questions for Stella.